Hey everyone, and welcome to the podcast. If you have a child who has ADHD, or if you have a child who has anxiety, if you find some big emotions and challenging behaviors really difficult to deal with, and lastly, if you have a child who has school can't or school refusal, then this episode is for you and you are in the right place. Today I have Rebecca Challoner on. Now she is the founder of My Spirited Child and the National Peak Centres, their therapy centres here in Australia. She is an absolute powerhouse in the space of neurodivergence and specifically ADHD and some of those things I mentioned. And so we had a huge conversation, like we literally had to wrap it up because we could have talked for another 2 hours. And we spoke about how to support kids who have these challenges. We spoke about what is really going on when we see a child, particularly an ADHD child, and they look like they're lazy or they look like they're explosive or rude or defiant. Like, what is really going on? And how do we help those kids? How do we help ourselves to stay calm? And then how do we support kids in those moments? We touched on things like aggression and aggressive behaviors, defiance and demand avoidance. This concept of how do we teach our kids not to hit when they're hitting and they're lashing out because they're so dysregulated or angry. She covered off a couple of myths. I wish all parents and teachers knew these concepts, these ideas and these beliefs. And I think now finally a lot of us are kind of moving out of those old traditional paradigms and into what's based on science and research and what's really going on, with kids' nervous systems. I also asked her, what do you wish people knew about ADHD and neurodivergence? And I loved her answer to that. So you guys can probably hear in my voice, I'm grinning. It's just such a joy to speak to someone like Rebecca. And yeah, she said, basically ask me whatever you want. And I threw some questions at her and she answered them all. So at the end, I will let you guys know a little bit about the masterclass she mentioned. It's called ADHD and Defiance, and she's running that online very soon. I forgot to mention, we also did talk about RSD. That's Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria, and a huge part of people with ADHD and what they struggle with. So please, stay tuned. It's a little bit over half an hour. I think I've got to edit it now, and I'll edit out some little gaps and ums and ahs and things like that. But pretty much you're in for about half an hour of just a really powerful and I think uplifting and insightful conversation with Rebecca. Ooh, I almost forgot. I do want to do our acknowledgement of country before I begin. I didn't really introduce myself, but I think you guys know who I am. If not, most episodes I introduce me as Stephanie Pinto, the host, and a bit about who I am. I won't do that today. I want to kind of get into it, but I do want to acknowledge the Darug Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I live, work, and record this podcast. I pay my respects to all First Nations people, their elders, and their ancestors, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and I stand in solidarity towards a shared future. Okay, now we can get into it. All right, enjoy. Hey, Rebecca, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. I've heard you speak, obviously, before. We've done some events together, and every time you share, even in our personal conversations, I'm just glued because you're so, you're so knowledgeable about ADHD and emotions and behavior, but also I can hear it just comes straight from your heart. It's what's that word when your heart's on your sleeve and you're just everything is open. You're like, yep, this is how it is. I love that.
Yeah, I am. I'm definitely an oversharer, that's for sure. But I'm very passionate about the area we're in and ADHD in particular, but also childhood behavior, helping children grow and understanding them and creating awareness. This is all it's all an area that I'm super invested in and super passionate about. So therefore, I tend to talk a lot about it.
Would you say hyper-focused?
Definitely hyper-focused, yes.
I love that. Okay, so for people who don't know a bit about you and your work yet, just tell us everything.
I have two kids. Both my kids are ADHD. My eldest son also has an intellectual disability. On top of that, I started, I guess, as close to the industry initially by working as a teacher 24 years ago, I started as a teacher in a school working with children who had neurodivergent challenges. Then I had my son, and then about 10 years ago, I'd done a lot of work in the area, and I sort of went, I need to do more. There's not enough information out there. There's not enough awareness. And I built a company called My Spirited Child, which runs a lot of conferences and that sort of thing. And that company was created literally with the aim of just creating more awareness for people, and more knowledge and good accurate awareness as well. And then from there, I kind of, myself and my colleague Christina Keeble went, you know what, the other thing that's really lacking in this world is therapy. Is really, you know, you walk into a therapy center with a child and you walk out feeling worse than you did when you walked in, because you're constantly told what's wrong with your child and how they need to be fixed or changed and all this sort of stuff. And we were so sick of that we decided to build multidisciplinary neuroaffirming allied health centers, where people went in and came out feeling better because they weren't told about how they needed to fix their child, but they were told about how awesome their child was already. And so we built the Peak Centres, which there's 2 of those in Victoria from there, and that kind of leads us to where we are now.
Oh, what a story. I love that you've got that personal element, like you're a parent of ADHD kids yourself, so you get that side of it, and I just think that adds a layer of real understanding and appreciation for what the kids are going through, and your ADHD yourself as well.
Yeah, and my husband's ADHD as well. So I live in a 100% ADHD household. Except I have 2 dogs and only one of those is ADHD. One of them definitely isn't. So there is 1 dog in our house that's not ADHD.
I love that. Okay, so where do we start when we're talking about ADHD? I was saying just before we hit record that you're the first person that I'm really bringing on that is, we're just going to talk about ADHD and the big emotions and challenging behaviors that come with that, because we know that's really a real struggle for parents and teachers to know how to support those kids. So what is maybe we start with, this is just where my brain goes. What are some of the like myths and misconceptions that people have when they think, oh, that kid is ADHD, or he's ADHD? Like what are some of those, maybe some of those older, beliefs and things like that you want to bust?
Yeah, well, there's hundreds, so we could be here all day just talking about those alone. But the big misconceptions, one is that a kid with ADHD is naughty. Kids with ADHD aren't naughty. Their nervous systems, their ability to regulate their brains are differently wired to a neurotypical child. And so when they feel those emotions, which everybody feels, they don't have the ability to regulate them like the neurotypical kid next door. So a lot of the time their responses, which come out as behavior, are different, and not through choice and not through control. And so when we see that ADHD kid as just being naughty, that's not it at all. They need a whole different level of support to help them to be able to regulate and stay within the lines, so to speak. And the other biggest myth, I think, around ADHD is caused by the title ADHD. It is, as it says, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Well, the problem with that is that it creates people it leads people to think that that's all it is. This is why giving any challenge, any disorder, any disability, giving it a title that is apparently several of its characteristics is always going to be a problem, because it doesn't allow for the things that aren't listed. And so, for ADHD, it has hundreds of characteristics. It doesn't just have these 2, attention deficit and hyperactivity. And so for a lot of people, who don't know more, that's all they're looking for, is a kid who can't pay attention and is really hyper. And then anything that comes around that and all these other characteristics, they assume is just the child's fault, when actually there's maybe 100 ADHD characteristics and the title just lists 2 of them. So it's a really bad title, and that creates a lot of stigma. So yeah, those would be the 2 big myths, I think.
Big ones. So can you name some of the other characteristics or traits of the ADHD brain that are not that deficit in attention? Also, maybe we talk about that it's not that deficit, it's almost that disorganization, but I don't know if we want to go there. Yeah, what are some of the other traits for ADHD?
So we'll go there in a minute, because I have a lot of thoughts on that too. But some of the other traits, I mean, there's loads. So some of the big ones would be what I call ADHD paralysis. So quite often we'll see ADHDs, and ADHDs can get labeled as lazy. quite often. That's very common. So it's there's this contradiction of people think they should be hyper because they should be on the go more and doing more, and they can be hyper if something excites them or stimulates them, but they can also, if they get hyper focused on their phone or gaming or the TV or whatever, they can end up locked in this paralysis, and it literally is a paralysis. You feel like you can't move. So that's like a really big one. Hyperfocus itself is a big one. A lot of people don't get diagnosed because they have the ability to hyperfocus, and teachers or parents go, well, they can focus when they're interested, and that is exactly it. They can focus when they're interested. I'm not going to go into why they can do that right now because it'll take us on another path, but they can. Things like rejection sensitive dysphoria, so the fear of failure and criticism and judgment, these are really big things. There's many executive function challenges, disorganization, time agnosia, which is the inability to understand time. So
is that what they call time blindness?
Yeah, so the neuroaffirming word for that is time agnosia, because basically, rightly so, the blind community didn't, as a general, didn't want that that correlation. So time agnosia is the
time agnosia.
More,
more
respectable term.
See, yes. Okay. So lots of different, and there's more, like you said, hundreds.
Oh, there's loads more. There's loads more. Sensory processing, the anger, dysregulation. There's tons of different things that people struggle with.
Yeah. Maybe let's focus on, you just mentioned some of those big, strong emotions like anger, frustration, anger, and the aggression that can come with that. Let's kind of move into that for a little bit, because I know there are a lot of families that struggle to know how to support their kids when they have these seemingly big knee-jerk impulsive reactions. Maybe tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, so if we think about anger, everybody has experienced anger at some point in their life. Every human being has experienced it and has felt it and know what it feels like. Now, for an ADHDer, they don't feel angry to here, they feel angry right up above their head, like it's this big scale of anger. So they feel anger more intensely. The problem is ADHDers don't have the ability to regulate their emotions. So when a neurotypical person feels angry, what will happen is they'll get angry and they'll go, oh, I'm starting to feel angry now. I need to do something. I need to calm myself down. And they have strategies that they can consciously and subconsciously put in place to help themselves regulate. ADHDs don't have that ability. So what happens is they start to feel angry, and that anger starts to almost chase itself. They'll get angrier and they'll get angrier and they'll get angrier until eventually they have a meltdown. And that's because they don't have that switch that allows them to regulate their own emotions. So what happens a lot of the time is they get angrier and angrier. They might swear, they might throw things, they might hit someone. The adults around them will start telling them off or disciplining them or punishing them in some way. And of course, nobody ever got less angry from people telling them off or shouting at them or telling them to calm down or any of those things. So they just keep getting angrier until they have this big meltdown, and then they get told off again. Whereas I always compare it to a runaway train. A runaway train does not have the ability to slow itself down. It takes external human intervention to slow that train down. And the angry ADHD brain is the same. It needs somebody outside of itself to help to calm them down, because they can't do it themselves. So it needs another adult or another person to say, it's okay, I'm here, and make them feel safe again, and make them feel safe and happy. And that's how and then those behaviors or the associated behaviors will stop. They're not coming from a place of choice. They're coming from a place of dysregulation and uncontrollable anger.
Yeah. And when you look at it that way, it's such a different lens, and it feels different as a parent. Like, I know, when I started to learn this stuff, we're talking about really the nervous system, which I talk a little bit about on this podcast. And when I understood that, as you said, it's not a choice, and this is the way we're wired, and when we see our child differently, we really have a different feel and a different approach. And I think it brings a lot more compassion and patience and tolerance and understanding, and a lot less of that feeling that I used to have, like especially when my oldest was little. And I used to be like, what is wrong with you? Like, stop it. Why are you doing that? Get in time out. Like we used all of those awful strategies that, as you said, added fuel to the fire and made things worse, and probably pushed that runaway train like a lot faster down the bloody track.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. And parents, and teachers, they want to do the best by their child, but they're being influenced by a lot of misinformation that's out there. And especially if your kid's ADHD, number one, then they're not going to be able to regulate themselves. They need more support. Number two, their nervous systems are naturally more heightened. So they're going to be spending a lot more time in fight or flight, which means that as a response, they're either going to fight, in other words, argue, throw, hit, any of those things, or they're going to run. And we see that a lot of time with kids who just bolt and do one. Or, they might freeze and then just go, no, and their answer to everything is no. And so we see these nervous system responses out of these kids, and what it's really, really important for adults to realize that doing those old-fashioned techniques of punishment and putting them in timeout and things like that are never going to help a child's nervous system to calm down. And when we realize that this is a physical thing internally in our body. Yes, we can't see it because there's skin in the way and there's, but internally in these kids' bodies and their brains, things are physically happening, which is causing this. And they need the same amount of support as any other physical disability to be able to manage those things. So we, the adults, need to, like you say, we need to take a different lens, but we need to go, okay, all these things that we're seeing that we don't like, they're coming from somewhere. Now, rather than try and fix the behavior, let's fix the place where it's coming from. Let's work on that and try and help them. And then, then we start to see those behaviors improve because their nervous system relaxes and they feel safer.
So is that what's going on with aggression when we see kids who really get to that point where they're absolutely overwhelmed and that maybe dangerous, like hitting, kicking, those kind of behaviors? Maybe talk to us a bit about what's going on there. And like you said, not just trying to fix or stop the behavior, but actually where do we then look at in terms of a parent who wants to know, yeah, my kid can be really explosive, and what are some things I can do to help?
Absolutely. So when we're seeing this massive explosion at the end, that's the meltdown, and the meltdown is coming out and being demonstrated as anger. And that's very common response for ADHDers, is they have these meltdowns, but they're angry meltdowns, which means that runaway train, it just crashed. Now, what we need to do, we need to try and help them in the moment, but we also need to help them ongoing, permanently. So to do that, we need to understand that, first of all, they have no control over that. A meltdown, whether it's an angry meltdown, whether it's a shutdown, or whether it's, that more commonly known meltdown where they're banging their head and screaming and that sort of thing. Any type of meltdown is not a child making a choice. It's not a child choosing to do it. So when a child is hitting and they're angry, no matter how much they might be looking directly at you, no matter how much it might look like a choice, it is not. And we have to remember that as that comes from a heightened nervous system, our job is to address the nervous system, not the result. So if we focus on, okay, they're in fight or flight. Fight or flight is a response to it's a natural physiological response to a feeling of unsafety. So to fix it, we need to make them feel safe. That's the most important thing. You never make someone feel safe by putting in punishments. That will never, ever do it. We need to make them feel safe by giving them support and showing them that they have unconditional positive regard. That means that we don't just unconditionally love them, but we unconditionally like them, and we are there for them. And when we do that, not only does it help them to come out of that, to get off those train tracks and slow that runaway train down, but it also helps, if we do it repeatedly, it helps long-term for them to feel safe and supported and not feel triggered by this constant failure and criticism that they feel all the time as an ADHDer. and their nervous system will start to settle down, and they'll start to feel calmer permanently and ongoing. And it's so what happens, and it takes a really short amount of time, when we start doing that every time and showing support, no judgment, no criticism, not influencing a feeling of failure, when we do that, is very, very quickly we see those behaviors start to actually change. And the most common question I get asked when I say this to people is, if I am supporting them and not criticizing them, how do I teach them not to hit? Well, the first thing is, if the child's over the age of 2, they know not to hit. What are you trying to teach them? Every kid knows they're not to hit.
Thank you. The amount of times I've said to people, I'm like, very early on, children learn what is right and wrong. They know they're not supposed to hit. They know lashing out is wrong and it's hurtful. But do you think they can muster the impulse control in the moment when they're heightened to be able to stop themselves from doing that? I'm like, we're asking the impossible.
Well, exactly. And if it's not a question of what they know or don't know, because they know that. So we don't need to teach them a lesson. There is no lesson to be taught. That's not where it's coming from. And then a lot of parents will try and control the behavior through fear by saying, well, if I make them afraid of the consequence, then they'll do it. But when we teach behavior purely through fear, there's 2 things that are going to happen. Either A, they're going to become more dysregulated, because fear is the opposite to feelings of safety. So we're putting their nervous system more into panic mode. So it's either going to get worse, or if you scare them enough, it'll get better because they are so scared. But then you end up with a child who grows up with significant trauma because they grew up in an environment where they were afraid all the time. So, and we don't want either of those for our kids. We don't want them to struggle more with dysregulation, and we don't want them to grow up with trauma. And the only way to not have that happen, when you have a child who is dysregulated and sits in fight or flight a lot of the time, is to help them feel completely supported, completely safe, not judged. That's very, very important. Not judged, not criticized, not failing. When we create that environment and they grow up feeling supported, there's no trauma there. We will see those behaviors start to even out because they feel safe. And eventually, after a long time of working through that process, we'll end up with not a compliant child. We don't want a compliant child. Compliant kids become compliant adults. We don't want those, but we want a child who feels safe and always feels safe. And in answer to teaching them, how do we teach them? Well, we teach them through respectful communication and role modeling, which is the way we would teach another adult if we had to teach them something. I wouldn't start shouting at my work colleague that they're doing something wrong. I'd just talk to them respectfully about it and help them understand the better way to do things. So respectful communication and role modeling is the best way to teach anyone.
Oh my goodness. I wish you guys, well, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see me literally grinning because I'm just grinning and nodding because everything you're saying, I just wholeheartedly, this is the stuff that I think, yes. I want parents to know this. I want teachers to know this. And I would love if kids could also start to understand about their own body and their own brain and their own nervous system. And anyway, then my brain goes off. But maybe can we go back to the rejection sensitive dysphoria? Because you've talked a bit about really making sure that we don't convey this message of judgment to our kids. Like, I'm so disappointed, or how could you do that? Or why'd you forget your hat again? Or hurry up, you're being so lazy. Like, oh, I think a lot of us accidentally say a lot of those things just to all kids, but maybe talk us through the rejection sensitive dysphoria part.
Yeah, so rejection sensitive dysphoria is really common in ADHD. It's a big challenge. As I said before, it's the fear of failure, criticism, and judgment. Now, the ADHD is really complex. So this is me trying to sort of sum up years and years of learning, in just a few minutes. But the best way I think to explain it is if you think if you imagine a cycle. Now, I say that ADHDers are born into this negative cycle where they fail. Now, because they have rejection sensitive dysphoria, fail makes them feel like they're being stabbed in the chest. And it really, nothing will push an ADHDer's nervous system to the absolute max more than feeling like they're failing or being judged or criticized. So they fail at something, they make a mistake because they're ADHD and that's what they do. And they make a mistake, and then their rejection sensitive dysphoria is triggered, their nervous system is heightened. And what happens then? They have a meltdown, they get angry, and they fail again. And they live in this cycle, and round they go for their entire lives. And as they're going round and round, they're failing more, they're getting punished, that's triggering, round they go. The only way to get them off this cycle is to get them on what I call the positive cycle, going in the opposite direction. Now, when we get them going the other way, ADHDers, as well as having rejection sensitive dysphoria, they also have the exact opposite to that, which is called recognition responsive euphoria.
I have not heard of it. How did I not know about that?
Yeah. So recognition responsive euphoria is basically the exact opposite of rejection sensitive dysphoria. It means that for an ADHD, as much as they struggle with failure and criticism and judgment, they thrive on success. Feelings of success really promote and push good self-esteem and help their nervous system to calm down. So what we need to do is get them on this opposite cycle where they suddenly feel calm, they feel happy because they felt success. Success triggers their nervous system to relax. They're happy. When they're happy and their nervous system is relaxed, they have a greater capacity to achieve. So then they're able to do these good things, which make them feel more success. And we need to get them off that negative cycle and onto this positive one. And to do that, we need to move away from focusing on all the things they're doing wrong and start focusing on helping them to feel really good about themselves. Self-esteem is so important. If we start building them up instead of pushing them down, we'll see them on this positive cycle doing well. It is important to remember that they're still ADHD. They're still impulsively going to say something they shouldn't say or do something they shouldn't do. And that's okay. When they do, it's our responsibility to not lock them back into that negative cycle. Ignore that thing and focus on something they did right to get them as quickly back onto the positive cycle as possible. So that's how we, can help them with that rejection sensitive dysphoria, not triggering those angry responses.
I like that. So getting off that negative loop and looking for, is it essentially like a takeaway would be looking for the positive, looking for something that they've done that is, kind or successful, or, where they put a lot of effort in and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just making them, and you can make someone feel successful in a million ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, they did this one thing right, well done. It doesn't have to be praise related. It certainly shouldn't be rewards. But it can be just building their self-esteem, making them feel good and successful within themselves. So, I get asked sometimes, there's a lot of kids, especially kids who are PDA, can really struggle with praise. So what we can do instead is we can do things like we can set them up to succeed. So we could be, let's say they're building, you're playing with some Lego. We could go, I would love to build a tower, but I'm not very good at building. It would be awesome though if I could build a tower. Can you have a go at this? And then we leave. And then when they build a tower, they go, well done me. I built a tower. My mom, my dad, my teacher, whoever said that would be really good. We're not giving feedback. We're preempting them being successful at something that we know they are going to be successful at. If they do something impulsively, so they impulsively shout something out or whatever, we completely ignore that. But in that moment, they will have, immediately after, they'll criticize themselves because they'll go, oops, shouldn't have done that. We need to get away from that. So we don't need to criticize them. They'll do it themselves. We need to pull them away from that and pull their focus onto something they've done well or something they feel good about. Could be anything at all. Just look at anything you can find that they've done good about or they feel good in themselves about. Start talking about, oh, remember last week when we did this and this? Wasn't that a great day out that we had? And anything that pulls their focus away from that, so we can keep them on that positive loop.
I really like how you said they're going to be beating themselves up anyway, right after they've done or said that thing. You don't need to, like, sometimes I feel like we accidentally drill it in, or you know what I mean? We say, hey, I can't let you get away with that. I need to tell you, you shouldn't hit, or that's not a nice thing to say. And I get that that's comes from a well-meaning place. We don't want our kids to feel like they can whatever, but like, they're already beating themselves up. They already know they shouldn't have done or said that thing. So we don't need to kind of hammer it in.
Yeah, especially ADHDers. We have to remember that ADHDers don't have impulse control. So for the rest of us, every single person on earth has thought, I really want to say this thing to you right now, but I won't, because I know that that's not the right thing to say. Everybody's thought that. Now with the ADHD, they know it's not the right thing to say, but they don't have the switch in their brain that tells them not to say it until it's too late. So they say the thing that everybody else was thinking, but they said it. And then immediately after they've said it, they know they shouldn't have said it, but it's too late. They can't put it back. They don't need any criticism or any acknowledgement from anyone else, because as soon as they've said it, their brain goes, oh, I shouldn't have said that. They will, as I said, they will criticize themselves. So nobody else needs to bring it up. And it's not just kids who do this. A couple of years ago, I was on holiday with my family, and I said something we were at the supermarket, and I said something to my husband in front of my son that was really inappropriate to say in front of a child. I can't even remember what it was, but I shouldn't have said it. It just came out impulsively at the time. Anyway, I instantly wanted to put the words back in, but couldn't. My husband, however, he's also ADHD, impulsively told me off for it in front of my child. And he went, that wasn't appropriate to say. Well, I was already beating myself up. Now, what happened, and this is like 43 at the time, what happened was I then walked off. I went, I'm just going to have some time. I walked off around the supermarket, and I was so angry, and I started to get angrier and angrier, to the point where I wanted to pull everything off the shelves. I didn't, because I'm a grown adult, and I was able to contain it enough because I've put those strategies in place over a lifetime. But what it led me to think was, if that was a 10-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid or an 8-year-old kid, they wouldn't have put those strategies in place. So what would have been the response? Pulling everything off the shelves would have been the response, because it should have been left, and it wasn't left. They should have just not. If my husband hadn't said anything, I'd have gone on still feeling a bit bad. I would have corrected myself. I would have made sure I, tried to put strategies in place to not say those things again. But because he picked up on it and he pulled it out and he criticized me, it triggered that rejection sensitive dysphoria and made me want to have a meltdown. And that's what happens to our kids.
Wow. And I like that you pointed out a 10-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid or a 4-year-old kid with ADHD is not going to have those strategies that you have taken time to discover and to implement and to put in place. Like that, they just haven't got them yet, right? That's not their own fault.
Well, and let's also not forget that the human brain doesn't fully develop until 25 to 30 years old. And the prefrontal cortex, the bit that's responsible for logic and reasoning, that develops last. So these 18-year-old, 15-year-olds, 22-year-olds, they don't have fully developed brains. So if I struggle to control these things, then of course someone without a fully developed brain is going to.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay, can we talk a little bit about school can't, also known as school refusal? Because I know that's something that you're very passionate about. Actually, it just popped in my mind. This is a little while ago. We were chatting on maybe Instagram, I think, and there was an article that you had sent me, and it was just we were just both fuming at some of the kind of policies and things that some people wanted to put in place. So maybe talk to us about school can't with these kids.
Yeah, and I mean, luckily the term school can't is starting to become more commonly used, which I like, because originally it was called school refusal. The problem with that, of course, is it makes it appear like it's a choice, and it's not a choice. Kids who school can't, so school refusal comes from a place of anxiety. It comes from a place of poor mental health. So when a child has school anxiety, in other words, they struggle with going to school for a myriad of reasons, what happens from there is that will slowly develop from school anxiety into school can't, where they literally struggle to go to school either all of the time or some of the time. And what's very, very important is that we don't just assume that they're refusing to go because they don't want to. It's never about that. It's because something's happening that they're struggling with that is creating this school anxiety. And it's very important that the system, that the teachers, that the schools, that the parents all start to really, grow in their knowledge about school can't and where it comes from, so that we can start making the school environment a place that doesn't cause children anxiety. School and everything that school brings with it, for a lot of our kids, is extremely challenging. Many of the things that happen at school, if they happen to us adults in the workplace, we'd quit. There's no way we'd keep going. I wouldn't go to a workplace if I was being bullied at lunchtime and I had expectations on me that were absolutely unrealistic most of the time, and only the person who always did really well was the person in the spotlight. And I had academic expectations, behavioral expectations, social expectations, all compiling all day, every day.
And if you stuffed up or if you didn't finish something on time, your name would be publicly put on the board for all your colleagues to see. Oh, Stephanie didn't finish the...
and the lines are so narrow. And if you deviate out those lines, no one sits down respectfully, has a conversation with you. You are punished. If I went into an environment, if I worked in an environment like that, I would quit. No one's going where I had to call my boss Miss Smith or Sir or whatever, and I had, I was barked at like I was being talked to like I was a dog. Like, there's no way I'd stay there. But we expect kids to stay there and not have anxiety. Well, and on top of that, we take all these neurodivergent kids and we create these sensory environments that are just horrific, with fluorescent lighting and uniforms that are uncomfortable, chairs that are uncomfortable, noise everywhere. The entire school environment is not set up for kids to do well in. Of course, we have this school can't issue at the moment. Let's, stop trying to fix the kids and start trying to fix the school environment.
Oh my God, that's a mic drop moment. I've never had anyone so eloquently put together this whole, it's a whole bubble of everything that our kids have to, I want to say, endure. It's really, it's wild when you think about, would you put up with, or would you treat someone else in a workplace or in a family with some of those strategy, those tactics? And yeah, now we realize, actually, no wonder there are a lot of kids who do not feel comfortable and do not feel safe. And by the way, I don't want to, we're not here to have a go at teachers or anything. I think teachers have an impossible job and they are incredible. And I think it's the system and just how far into this kind of, I don't know, this system that things have gone. So anyway, before we finish up, do you have any advice? What would you say to parents who are experiencing or on the edge of experiencing school can't with their kids, and they think, I don't know what to do, my child doesn't want to go, this is really hard, mornings are dreadful? What sort of advice or words do you have for them?
Trying to keep this brief. Okay. I could do that in about an hour. So the main thing is put a different lens on it. View it with compassion towards your child. Try and speak with the school, try and address what is actually causing the anxiety. Remember, school can't is anxiety. That's where it's coming from. So what is causing that anxiety? Try and address that. Mental health days are absolutely okay. Children can have a day off. It is not going to hurt them. It's not going to hurt their career. And absolutely keep in mind, and this is not that I don't value education, I do, but it's not more important than mental health. I failed school completely. I now have a law degree, I have 7 diplomas, and I own 2 companies. School is not everything.
Can you just repeat that? You failed school and yet you have a law degree, you have 7 diplomas, you own 2 therapy centers, and My Spirited Child, which puts on huge, powerful, amazing, empowering conferences all over Australia and New Zealand. I don't think you're doing too bad.
No. And I literally failed school completely. I was the typical ADHD, always in trouble, never did well, completely failed school. I didn't go back to college and uni till I was a grown adult. I was 27 when I restarted college and uni, which is a very different environment to the school one. So not that I'm saying that school doesn't matter. School does matter. I don't think as a system we're doing school right. And if we did school right, it would matter a lot more. But if your child doesn't attend school all the time, some of the time, one day a month, whatever they need to get their mental health right, that's what's important, mental health. When you go into a school and you speak to the teachers and you speak to the principals, don't be talking to them necessarily about, are they getting straight A's? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? Talk to them about, what are you doing to help their mental health? What are you doing to build this child's self-esteem? That's what actually matters. And that's what's going to lead to them coming out of school and being successful, is feeling good about themselves.
I'm not meant to have favorite interviews, but this is... I love, we kind of kept some of this gold right towards the end. I mean, it was all, this whole interview has been absolutely, it's been such a pleasure, but just, I feel like we could talk for another, another couple of hours on this stuff. Yeah, I'm just nodding and smiling, and I just wish I would love parents to really, I hope so many hear this interview. Is there anything you want to leave us with, or leave the parents listening with, just to kind of give them a little bit of, I don't know, some compassion or some hope or a message from you?
Well, I just think, first of all, always have hope. I was that kid. I was always fighting, always in trouble. I got kicked out of school. I literally got kicked out of the classroom every day through secondary school. I failed at everything. I didn't pass a single exam. So always have hope, because you can turn around. And most ADHDers actually are really, really successful. So definitely have hope, but also knowledge is power. Go out, learn. Don't just believe the stigma that's around. Go out and learn about things, and if you want to be on someone's side, be on your child's side, because if they feel like you're on their side, that's everything.
If you want to be on someone's side, be on your child's side. That's gold. Okay, so I'm going to hold something up. You guys, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see. But for everyone on the podcast, I'm holding up the ADHD Masterclass, which I received. We swapped our books when we were at the conference in Auckland a little while ago, and I love that is now my Bible. It's literally sitting right next to my computer. I love it. I love how you've just packed everything that parents and teachers, could want to know about ADHD in there. But you have, for people who want to learn more and they want to find out more about you and your work, you've got a couple of classes and workshops online coming up. So can you tell us about those?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch, but and you can go on the My Spirited Child website, they're all on there. But there's an online ADHD and defiance one coming up in a few weeks' time. And then the masterclass that goes with that workbook that you've got there, actually, there's an online one of those coming up as well. And there's a bunch of, there's always, on the My Spirited Child website, there's always a bunch of events, some in person, some online. So get yourself along to one of those if you can. And we've got a load of workbooks like that and things that I've created on the website as well, if people want to take a look at those.
Brilliant. Okay, we're going to put all the links down in the show notes, so you guys will be able to find those, or we'll put it down below the video on YouTube. So My Spirited Child is the best place to go to find out and book in for those classes and masterclasses. All right, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Okay, hey everyone, it's me again. So I'm going to put down the information for the ADHD and Defiance seminar in the show notes. If you guys are interested, please go and check that out. It is coming up very soon. It's in September. So it's an online seminar. It's going to really take a look at tips and tools that support both kids and teens who struggle with defiance and, those challenging behaviors. Rebecca's going to help people who come along to really not only thoroughly understand ADHD and defiance and where it comes from and why kids and teens struggle with that defiance, but also strategies to help parents like you or educators like you, other health professionals, to provide the best strategies and support to the ADHDer in their life. So I think for parents, this will really give you guys the opportunity to understand and support these behaviors with practical strategies that you can actually take away and implement immediately, and they're going to be effective. Like, this is her bread and butter. This is what she does. This is what she's really good at. She is an award-winning speaker and trainer and person in this space. So I think if you're an educator or another professional working with young people with ADHD, this is also going to be really helpful because it will give you the tools and the information that you can use in the classroom or in the clinic or in another non-home environment. And it's going to help you to create those really good outcomes and help the child and teen to provide, to find a bright and successful future, which is what they all deserve, as we all do. So it's the ADHD and Defiance seminar. I will put the details down below so you guys can find that. Please go along. Let me know how it is. I know it's going to be absolutely really, really empowering and uplifting and practical. And Rebecca is just a joy to talk to. As you heard, we were having some laughs as well in the conversation. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll see you same time, same place next week for another episode.